The wind rumbled over the vast expanse of ice. In this white wasteland, a man in tattered winter overalls was methodically picking at the snow. It was Pilot Overguard. The camera moved upward. A huge inscription appeared on the snow-white canvas, SOS. Throwing back the last clump of snow, Overguard straightened up, rubbing his frozen fingers. In the distance he could see his shelter. Not so long ago it was still flying in the air. When he returned, the first thing he did was check the holes, for he was hungry. Lunch was traditional, fresh fish. He lazily cut off pieces, chewing mechanically, and went to bed. The night passed without incident. First thing in the morning he went to clean the stone. Who's lying there? Obviously someone even less fortunate than Overguard. Muttering something unintelligible, he went back to his duties, cleaned the SOS, checked the holes. But fate decided to diversify his routine. Overguard came across polar bear tracks. Overguard switched into don't become someone's breakfast mode and rushed to the airplane. Slamming the hatch shut behind him, he froze, listening. Hearing nothing, he calmed down. The monotonous days dragged on until one day he spotted a helicopter in the distance. Overguard's signal was received, and the helicopter headed toward him. But the Arctic was unfavorable. A fierce side wind tossed the helicopter like a paper toy, and a moment later it crashed down with a crash. Overguard rushed to the crash site. There was no explosion, so there was still a chance to save the men. There were 2 pilots in the cockpit. One was dead. The other, a young woman, unconscious but alive. Overguard's assessing the damage. Blows, cut on the abdomen, blood. Bad, but not fatal. The storm subsides, and Overguard searches the helicopter for belongings. Ice axe, map, instant noodles. After raw fish, it seemed like a feast of kings. Plus he found a gas burner. Now he could eat warm food. Making a makeshift sled out of the helicopter doors, he loaded the girl onto it. At the camp, he got the girl drunk, but she soon passed out again from weakness. He decided to return to the crash site. Among the wreckage he found a lighter. Before leaving, he found a photo of the girl with her husband and child in the helicopter. When he returned, he pinned it next to her so that when she woke up, she would remember what she had fought for. For the first time in weeks, Overguard lit a fire. The burner flared and the air smelled not of snow, not of fish, not of fear, but of real food. The first hot dish was trout and noodles. But first he tried to feed the girl. She was too weak, but at least she didn't refuse. Overguard tended to the wounded woman, signaling in hopes that rescuers would come for their own. But no one showed up, and in such a cold place, her condition began to deteriorate. He realized he couldn't stay here any longer. The plan was clear: take what he needed, leave a note, and drag the girl north to the weather station. He loaded the sled with provisions, wrapped the girl in a sleeping bag and set off. At night he dug a hole in the snow to shelter from the wind. In the morning they continued on their way. Soon they came to a steep pass. They couldn't go in a straight line. A detour would take 5 days, not 2. Overguard tried to raise the sled on a rope, but each time it fell. In impotent rage he pounded his fist on the snow. He spent the night in the cave he found, blocking the entrance with snow. The girl was almost unresponsive. Overguard tried to get her drunk, but she would not wake up. At that moment, he heard a sound. Something heavy was moving outside, breaking up the snow. Overguard froze, clutching his ice axe, a useless weapon against the monster. It was breaking into the cave, its huge head going inside, but its body was stuck. In the fight for life, the bear was not going to leave them alone so easily. Smelling prey, the polar bear burst into the cave. Overguard grabbed his rocket launcher and started screaming with rage. It worked. The bear, who had not seen such an enraged man, ran away. In the morning, the storm decided not to subside, and they were plunged back into the chaos of the elements. He had to make camp right where he stood, tucking the sides of the sled to create at least a semblance of protection from the wind. The woman's body grew weaker by the day. Her eyes were inflamed, and her lips were bleeding. The wound was inflamed, and he had no antibiotics with him and no time for a long courtship. Overguard placed a picture of her family in the palm of his hand, hoping it would give her strength. Fate decided to present him with another difficulty. The ice beneath his feet suddenly failed, and he collapsed into an underground cave. The blow was severe, and consciousness left him for a moment, and when it returned, his right leg was caught in a crevice. Attempts to pull the limb out only resulted in a new wound. In desperation, using all his strength, he finally freed himself. When he got out, the wounded woman briefly regained consciousness, but immediately fell back into unconsciousness. He tugged at the wound on her leg and, gritting his teeth in pain, continued on his way. The problem was that there was no more water left and his speed had dropped to a pitiful crawl. Besides, they were still halfway there. To make it easier on himself, he dumped the extra cargo, dishes, empty containers, thermos, radio beacon, even his ice axe. The latter looked at him reproachfully, as if to hint that it would still come in handy. Overguard pushed those gloomy thoughts aside and climbed the hill to look around. And then, for the first time in a long time, fate winked at him not with the black eye of despair, but with a ray of hope. He spotted a helicopter. Overguard was numb with happiness and went back for the sled to climb to the top with the wounded woman. He then lit a flare, but it was impossible to spot it from such a distance in daylight. Then, driven by desperation, he took off his jacket, set it on fire and started waving it around. But the pilots saw nothing. Overguard collapsed to his knees, exhausted, crushed. He lowered the woman to the snow and lay beside her, clutching her palm. Tired lips whispered, "It will be all right," but his voice trailed off into a whisper. Her eyes were closing, he had no strength left to fight any further. He didn't hear the noise of the approaching propeller. Didn't see the helicopter land behind him. If you want to see more videos like this, don't forget to subscribe and like the channel. See you soon.